Hi everyone, welcome to today's sharing on home, where the learning of Chinese begins. I'm Renee Tan, the facilitator of the session. We have with us here Mother Xingwei and the daughter Chan Yan.
Hi, I'm Xinwei. It is my pleasure to share my experience in raising a bilingual child.
If you have children aged 0 to 6 years or know someone who does, please remember to share this video. At the end of the session, we will also have a discussion on some frequently asked questions. Xingwei, how does your family go about encouraging your children to speak Mandarin?
Given the proliferation of English in Singapore environment, my husband and I made the conscious decision to speak only Mandarin to our children at home since birth. As this is the language we use with them since the day they were born, using Mandarin to converse therefore does not become something that requires a lot of effort.
Many children have the tendency to speak in multi-languages in a sentence or choose to speak in a preferred language in particular situations. How would you encourage your children to speak good and proper Mandarin and in most situations?
I observed that once my children started preschool, there is a tendency for them to start mixing English into their conversations with me. When that happens, I usually adopt one of the following 3 strategies to encourage them to switch back to Mandarin. If it is a normal daily conversation, and I know they are able to more or less express themselves in Mandarin, I will simply pretend not to understand what they are saying until they switch back to Mandarin. Now, if they are recounting something that happened in school or explaining something that they learned in school, I will use strategy 2, whereby I will paraphrase what they said in Mandarin. In such situations, they probably struggle with translating their recount or explanation into Mandarin, as whatever happened in school probably all took place whereby English was the language used.
That's an interesting observation. Can you share some examples of your strategies to weave in Mandarin in the conversation that first started in English?
Well, for example, my daughter might come home and be excited about a particular science lesson. She might excitedly tell me, Mommy, guess what? My science teacher showed us a caterpillar today in class. I will go, 你的科学老师今天在上科学课时给你看了一条毛毛虫。对呀，毛毛虫是什么颜色的？你有碰毛毛虫吗？ By then, usually the conversation would be steered back into Mandarin. Sometimes they can speak mostly in Mandarin, but only struggle with certain keywords. That's when I will use strategy 3, whereby I will translate those keywords into Mandarin and get them to repeat what they say, this time using the Mandarin keywords instead.
I recall myself doing the same with my kids, and this strategy seemed to work as they switched to conversing in Mandarin. But if they could not find the Mandarin word to express themselves, they would mention it in English, and I would translate the word to Mandarin and also get them to repeat it after me. So Chan Yan, were you even aware about your mom's strategies?
I had absolutely no idea. To me, I was simply having a normal conversation with my mom.
Wow.
I think it has subconsciously become a habit to reply in the language I am spoken to. If someone speaks to me in English, I will reply in English. But when someone speaks to me in Mandarin, I will reply in Mandarin. There isn't really a reluctance or avoidance of a particular language.
Besides getting your children to speak in Mandarin, do you have other strategies to help your children develop a proficiency in Chinese?
I dare not say it is the strategy, but I do think stories and reading definitely played an important role in helping my children develop a proficiency in Chinese language. From the time they could sit on my lap, around 8 months or 9 months old, I started reading stories to them. My goal was to get them to enjoy listening to stories in Mandarin, so I chose books with colorful pictures and funny or interesting stories line. To get them engaged with the stories, I would dramatize the stories, maybe use different voices for different characters or portray different emotions through different tones. Here's a video of how I would read Chinese books to them.
有一天，狐狸在路上听小花猫说，小熊准备了好吃的，请朋友们到他家去做客。狐狸问小花猫，可不可以也带他到小熊家去吃好吃的？小花猫说，你不爱劳动，又爱偷别人家的东西，我才不带你去呢。狐狸又去问小黄狗， 可不可以也带他去小熊家吃好吃的？小黄狗也同样说：“你不爱劳动，又爱偷别人家的东西，我才不带你去呢。”狐狸又去问小公鸡：“可不可以也带他去小熊家吃好吃的？”小公鸡照样对他说：“咕咕咕，你不爱劳动，又爱偷别人家的东西，我才不带你去呢。”狐狸生气地说：“你们都不带我去，我干脆自己去小熊家。”
From the video, you could see that my intention was not to get them to recognize the Chinese characters. Hence, I did not point to the Chinese characters while I told them the stories. It was sufficient for me that my children could follow the stories and were engaged with the stories.
So Chen Yan, do you think your mom's storytelling had influenced you on your speaking and writing in school?
Of all the things my mom did, I think storytelling was probably my favorite part. I have many fond memories of my mom telling or reading stories to me. There were many favorite stories I made my mom tell me over and over again. I'm not sure how much of an influence this created, but I'm definitely interested in languages. Although I'm much less dramatic than my mother, I very much enjoy things like Chinese creative writing or Mandarin public speaking.
It is said that learning a language comes with its culture. Xingwei, what do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's why, besides using stories to expose them to a wider vocabulary, I also use stories to give my children exposure to Chinese cultures, such as Chinese mythologies, Chinese customs, and Chinese festivals. When introducing Chinese festivals, I try to time the stories just 1 to 2 weeks before the actual festival. Like I will tell the story of 爱国诗人屈原 a week or 2 before 端午节. I will also supplement it with activities related to the festival, such as bringing them to watch dragon boat racing and eating 粽子.
What was your favorite story that's close to your heart, Chen Yan?
One childhood favorite was the story about Nian. I remember I liked it so much that I even brought it to school to share with my classmates near Chinese New Year when I was either in kindergarten or lower primary.
What is it about this 年的故事 that makes you like it so much?
这个故事里的年是一个由孤独聚集起来的怪物，它因为感到特别孤独，所以会经常跑到村子里去吓唬人们。人们为了不被年抓着，就会热热闹闹地聚在一起，张灯结彩，穿得大红的。这个故事不但讲解了新年的一些习俗，比如年为什么要一家团圆，为什么要穿红衣等，故事的结尾还非常温馨。年是因为被关心而脸红，变成红色可爱的新年。故事的概念很巧妙，里面的插图也非常可爱，这应该也是为什么我到现在还对这本书记忆犹新吧。
Thank you for sharing with us such a lovely story about Chinese New Year. What about yourself? Do you have any fond or favorite memories of how you celebrate Chinese festivals at home?
One of my favorite memories is probably celebrating Mid-Autumn Festival. Not only do we gather at my grandparents' place for a big dinner, my mother will also prepare lantern riddles for all the children, including my cousins and my sister. For every right answer, we will get a sweet as a reward. Some of the lantern riddles were very interesting. 比如半字剃头发或拳脚相加等字谜，我们把它们当成游戏来玩，不但有趣，也让我更加体会到汉字的精髓。
My kids are 2 plus and 5. I started with flashcards first, with words association with items on the cards and training them on photographic memory. When recognition becomes easier, I then followed by other exercises like words matching with images, storybook reading, and easy words writing. And Xingwei, how did you go about it?
Well, similarly, to prepare my children for independent reading of Chinese books, I also started teaching them to recognize Chinese characters from about 4 years old. There are many books in the market that could be used to teach children character recognition. Out of convenience, I chose a series that came with ready-made cards. I did not have a specific strategy to it. Basically, I taught them 1 new character a day and revised the characters I've taught periodically. After about 2 years, they would have learned to recognize roughly 600 characters. Now, once they recognized about 600 characters, I started them on guided reading of books. I've recorded a short clip of a typical guided reading session I have with my child.
只见神童爸爸拿起一个黑色的遥控器，按下按钮，一块巨大的白色
幕
布
就是 screen
给缓缓落下，
缓
落下。什么是缓？
慢慢的，
就来渐渐这样。
不是慢慢，
大牛指着幕布说：“我知道了，这是投影仪
projector。
没错，以后聪聪就用这个投影仪来看动画片，而且还不伤眼睛。”
As she reads, I would also ask simple questions to make sure that she comprehends what she is reading. Sometimes she might be able to read the characters, but not able to comprehend the meaning within the context. So sitting beside her as she reads allows me to gauge her comprehension through her facial expression. Most importantly, the reading sessions have to be fun and something that they enjoy so that they will look forward to. We did it almost every night, 365 days a year. It has become something like a ritual for my children. I only stopped guided reading with my elder daughter when she started secondary school. I'm still doing guided reading with my younger daughter.
The guided reading basically felt like an extension of storytelling, just that I was the one reading the stories instead of my mom. Admittedly, it was a struggle in the beginning. Thankfully, my mother and I both persevered, and the process became a lot easier and enjoyable, and I appreciated being able to continue chasing the story plot on my own, instead of my mother reading to me only a chapter at a time. Until now, I still enjoy sharing stories with my mom, which we often bond over.
What a parent-child bonding through sharing of stories, Xingwei. How do you know what books are most suitable for your children, based on their age or ability?
I definitely chose books based on their ability. The rough gauge I use is to choose books whereby she could read about 70% of the characters. Here are some examples of books they read in lower primary. I also like to choose titles that come in series. After being guided through one or two books from the same series, they will be able to read independently the rest of the books in the same series. In addition, I also try to expose them to as many different writing styles by different authors as possible. It is really through trial and error that I learn what type of books they gravitate towards too. If they like a particular author, I'll get more books from that author. If they don't, I'll move on to another one. The difficulty level of the books will increase as they get older and their mastery of the Chinese language becomes stronger. So for example, in upper primary, we read 三国演义 together.
Xingwei, I think you have shared in detail how you have step-by-step nurtured a bilingual child by making learning of Chinese at home as natural and fun as possible. How about summarizing the session in point forms for your audience for their easy recap?
Sure. Let's start from day one. So from birth to before schooling, make the conscious decision to speak only Mandarin to our children at home since birth. After schooling, when they start mixing English into the conversation, Strategy 1, to pretend not to understand what they say in English. Strategy 2, to paraphrase the English language, a sentence in Chinese and steer the conversation back into Mandarin. Strategy 3, to translate the difficult keywords into Chinese and get the children to repeat what they say, this time using Mandarin instead. Storytelling by mother, around 8 or 9 months old, to dramatize the stories to get them enjoy listening to stories in Mandarin, not about recognizing Chinese characters. Expose them to Chinese cultures, such as Chinese mythologies, Chinese customs, and Chinese festivals. Character recognition from 4 to 6 years old, 1 new character a day, and revise the characters learned periodically. Recognize 600 characters over 2 years. Guided reading, storytelling by the children. Reading sessions have to be fun and consistent, every night, 365 days a year. Choose suitable books that the child can read 70% of the characters and slowly increase the difficulty level. Independent reading, After guided through 1 or 2 books from the same series, the child will be able to read independently the rest of the books in the same series, expose them to as many different writing styles by different authors as possible.
Now we know home can be the cradle where the learning of Chinese begins. So Chan Yen, do you want to conclude by sharing your feelings in your Chinese learning journey under a consciously designed home environment?
I have always been glad that Chinese has been a part of my life. One big reason, of course, is that I don't have to do painful things like memorize model compositions, which really kills the joy of learning a language. Having the chance to live and breathe the Chinese language on a day-to-day basis really allows me to fully appreciate the nuances of the language and culture, which is really what is fun about learning languages in the first place. Beyond that, I think I, as a student, can really understand how hard it can be to learn Chinese. Even though I have been privileged enough to grow up in such an environment, learning Chinese has not been completely a breeze. There are times when I felt that I was unable to express myself that well in Mandarin, and that made me reluctant to speak Mandarin. I really appreciate my mom's assistance because they trained me not just to speak Mandarin, but to embrace Chinese instead, making learning Chinese become a much happier process.
In my family, I would do my best to speak with my 2 children in Mandarin more while my husband speaks in English, so they're exposed to dual languages. What do you think about this practice?
This is definitely a good strategy too. I'm not against bilingual or multilingual learning. In fact, I strongly believe in bilingual or multilingual learning from young age. The reason I advocate a pure Mandarin-speaking family environment is due to the prevalence of English in Singapore. English is the language our children get exposed to the minute they leave home, whether it's in the malls, in restaurants, or on play dates. That is why I believe it is important to provide a Mandarin-speaking environment at home so that they can be exposed to both languages at the same time. As well, from an emotional perspective, I also want my children to associate the Chinese language as their family language. I hope that when they think of the Chinese language, they associate the language to the love and warmth of the family and not think of it as a subject they have to learn in school.
In this digital era, we often see children, even as young as babies, watching animated videos or using educational apps on digital platforms. Would you use these gadgets if you had a chance back then to do so?
I personally prefer traditional way of using print books for storytelling and dramatizing. Each reading can be customized according to the needs of the child, as compared to an animated book, which is always the same every time you watch it. I also believe that the bond created between a parent and a child through reading stories together goes way beyond just learning a language. Hence, if the parent is able to read Chinese, I feel traditional print books is preferred. However, animated books can play an important role too. It is easier to capture a child's interest with animation and music. However, I feel animated books is best used as a supplementary tool to complement face-to-face interaction. The digital contents in the market, I feel, also lack customization. So hence, I feel it is best if children are not left on their own to watch digital content, but be facilitated and guided by parents and teachers.
Well, I truly agree. I do not leave them on their own with their, devices and decide what they want to play as and when. I think we have to facilitate that a lot and choose the right channels or even the right programs for them to watch.
Definitely.
And understand that not all parents are proficient in Chinese language. Some of them cannot recognize or pronounce the Chinese words themselves and thus are unable to teach their children the language correctly. Under such circumstances, do you think these parents should use or have external help?
The important point here is parents or even grandparents' involvement in the learning journey of the children. Parents' attitude is influential. They could be not proficient in Chinese, but show willingness and curiosity to learn together with the children. I personally know a Korean lady who would pre-learn Chinese words using Google Translate and digital dictionary of a story before she reads it to her daughter. I was really impressed with her commitment. I think even if her pronunciation is not top rate, her daughter will be motivated by her mother to learn the language well too. This is what I meant by parents' attitude is influential.
Indeed, right. Thank you, Mummy Singwei and daughter Chan Yen. It was an enjoyable discussion with you both.
Thank you, Renee. It was an enjoyable discussion for me too. Thank you.